I might go down there if that's all right. Because sitting up there, I feel like I'm marrying somebody else and I'm sitting at the bridal table. It's a bit odd. Although they're very topical at the moment. My name is Nick Bowditch. Thank you, Jane, for introing me. Thanks for inviting me today. I had no idea the seafood industry was so conflict-ridden. I love that. After just sitting through that panel, that's awesome. But I was really happy that Stan mentioned story, and in particular, how you drag metrics, how you get that return on the investment from story, because that's what I do. You know, I'm a digital storyteller. I help people tell their stories better. And this session is going to be very different, I feel like, from the rest of the day, because this session is really about you. And, you know, what your jobs and your industry and what role you fill in the industry and whatever, but I really want you to think about you and your ability to tell story and what your story is. Our story is rapidly becoming the only unique thing we have about ourselves, you know, and a lot of the times, we think about our story as being afraid of it, or being unable to say it out loud, or being unable to own it, or whatever. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit today to see how we go around changing that potentially. I'm Matt Nick Bowditch across everything, Facebook, Twitter, Insta or whatever. If you have any questions we don't get to today, please hit me up on there. I'll watch that and the hashtag as well. Seafood directions for the rest of the day and answer any questions you have. But that's me. My aim today, in the next 40 minutes, is to get you to think differently about just one thing. And that one thing will be different for everybody in the room, right? But if I speak for 40 minutes about rebooting thinking, about changing and reframing your story, and you don't feel any differently at the end of it, then I've done a pretty crap job, and that'll get back to my employer. So I really want you to think differently, and I'm going to challenge you to do that, even if you are fairly dead set on how you think and how you believe in things. First of all, before we even start, I want you to think of something that you are afraid of. I don't mean spiders or snakes, because that's normal. Everyone should be afraid of snakes, right? But I want you to think about, in the way you tell your story professionally, in the way you own what you do and who you are and your industry and whatever, what are you afraid of? What would you be absolutely petrified to put out there about yourself in this industry, about your business, about your job, about your family, whatever it might be? I just want you to be mindful of that for about 20 seconds and hold that until the end, because I'll challenge you again at the end to see if we can maybe drag that out of a few people. I am a storyteller, and I love stories. I love stories at the pub, I love stories at my school, I love stories. Listening to my kids tell stories is constant and awesome. And you know, the majority of the stories my kids tell just go on and on and on, have no kind of meaning or purpose or plot or end. But you know, it means that I am involved in story all the time. I'm absorbing story all the time. And I can kind of date that back a few years to where I first sort of fell in love with story and the ability to market a product or a business through telling your story. I was in Morocco, in Marrakesh. Has anyone been to Marrakesh? Yeah, a few people. So this is Jumeirah al Fnaa, which is the main sort of plaza in Marrakesh. And when I was in Marrakesh, I was there for about 2 weeks, and it was summer. So it was like 50 degrees, 50 degrees all day. And you don't do very much, you just sit around and go, Jesus, this is what 50 degrees feels like. But then at night, this place comes alive, and you can see the kitchens are wheeled in and the souks open up, and people come from everywhere. And it's this heaving mass of humans and selling and noise and smells, and it's fantastic, right? It's as Northern African as you can get. It's amazing. And in amongst this crowd, there's snake charmers and acrobats and buskers and whatnot. And there's about 4 or 5 really, really old dudes who are storytellers. And they sit or stand, depending on how old they are, on a milk crate, and they just tell stories. And these stories go for 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And you know, some are nationalistic stories, some are real proud Moroccan stories, some are funny, some are romantic, some are whatever. And the very first night I was there, I wandered down into this mess of humans and noise and smells, and I sat in front of this guy, and he looked about 115 years old, this dude, and he was really quiet, but most of the time, but he told these stories, and I sat in front of him listening to these stories for about 2.5 hours. Didn't move, nor did a couple of hundred people, probably this many people, sitting around listening to him tell these stories. And I was laughing when it was the funny bits, and I was crying when it was the sad bits, and I was right into it, hanging on his every word, this fella. And he didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak a word of Arabic, right? But he was that good at telling stories that you just knew exactly what was going on, and he got you. He really got you. And I can remember thinking at the time, as a marketer, thinking, well, shit, there's no excuse why I can't sell a product in my own geographic region, in my own language, to people who understand my culture. If this guy can do it in the north of Africa, in Arabic, about ancient Moroccan stories, and I haven't got a clue what he's saying, but I am absolutely hanging on every word. And so I feel like that is our first excuse, right? As businesses and marketers and industries, if someone doesn't buy our stuff, they don't get us, or they don't understand, or they don't value it, or they don't get why it's important. Or that's on us, right? That's on us because we've done a poor job of telling a story. So let's work a little bit on that. And first of all, I feel like to tell a story, you must frame it, right? But your story, in a lot of ways, has already been written. You're already acting it out. And I'll challenge you that a lot of people in this room are probably acting out somebody else's story right now. You probably are in the job that, or not probably, you might be in the job that you were meant to be in because that's the job your family's in. You might be married and have children because that's what you're supposed to do. Your kids might be doing the same thing because that's what they're supposed to do. They're living your story, you're living your parents' story, we're all living the Australian story, whatever it might be, because we haven't chosen to reframe that story, right? And I talk a lot about storytelling from my own point of view because I'm a bit of an oversharer, as you'll find out in a moment. But part of my retelling and reframing of my story is owning all the stuff that's not that great about me. So, I start with this slide a lot when I present because this is the authentic representation of who I am. Authenticity is very, very important to me. If I come to a gig like this and I wear a suit and tie, and that's nothing against anyone wearing a suit and tie, but if I do it, I look really uncomfortable for a start. But the secondary thing that comes out of that is you'd be sitting there thinking, that dude is lying to me. And I would be. If I put a suit and tie on, I'm doing that for you, not for me. I'm living your story, not mine. Right? So that's not authentic, and I don't want the very first interaction I have with anyone to be a lie. Right? So this is me. Today I have shoes on, which is very unusual, but that's another little authentic twist. So this is why I work. These four feral but delightful little things are very important to my life, and they're the reason that I want to tell stories better. They're the reason that I want to market products better. They're the reason that I want to help people build their businesses and infrastructure better through story. Because Jesus, I hear a lot of them, stories that is, and most of them are terrible. I'm telling you, from this one especially, wow. Every third story is about his toes, and it goes for 45 minutes, and it doesn't really. But because of that, I'm pretty good at deciphering story as well. As Jane mentioned, I also worked at a couple of big brands that you're probably aware of, Facebook and Twitter. I come from a tech startup background, a learning and development background. Then I became a marketer from there. And I am an ambassador for Lifeline in Australia and also for the Carers Foundation Australia as well, which is based in Queensland. That's the PR version of my story, right? That's the brochure, that's the website. It's not that it's not true, but let's talk about what is true. Because this is also me. I'm somebody who lives with depression and mental illness. My depression sometimes is so marked that I cannot get out of bed for a day or a week when it's ordinary, fortnight when it's extremely ordinary. My depression isn't something that I battle against. People often introduce me and they say, "Oh, this is Nick. He battles with depression." Not in a social setting, like in a speaking setting. People are kinder than that in the pub, but I don't suffer from it. I don't battle against it. I live with it. Words have power, right? And if I'm in a battle with something as big as depression, I'm going to lose. Every time I make it adversarial like that, I'm going to lose, right? So I just live with it. Right? I live with anxiety too. Anxiety is fairly new It's only about a year old, which is awesome. Just keep adding on extra mental illness as I get older. People collect, tea towels and stuff, not me. But for anyone who lives with anxiety, they'll know it's the pits, man, it's the pits. And the interesting thing about my anxiety is this doesn't make me anxious at all, right? But if I have to speak to two of you after this in a little closed session of just the three of us talking, it freaks me out, and small talk just makes my head explode, right? So this is an interesting thing about me because I've managed to reframe my anxiety because this is my job. If this makes me anxious, I'm buggered. Right, so I've chosen to kind of work on that. I also live with PTSD, which is a result of childhood trauma where I was physically and emotionally and sexually abused as a child, tortured for a few years by someone outside of my family. And that has, come back 30 years later to me, which I didn't think about for 30 years, and now it's suddenly in my life. And it means that my depression and anxiety is worse because I don't sleep very well because I have nightmares, blah, 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 right? So, and also, I'm, just in case you're thinking, couldn't get any worse, I'm also in recovery from drug addiction. I've been in recovery now since the 10th of January last year. Thank you. And it's, it's a daily slog, right? It's a daily slog. And when you have madness, sometimes a little bit of, the only way to stop that madness is to introduce something else into my head. So I've managed to try and get out of that. Now, I tell you all those things. I told you I was an oversharer, right? I tell you all those things because that's good for me. That reframes my story. And hopefully, somebody sitting in this room goes, oh shit, that's me. Hopefully not all of that. But, one of those things you might just think, wow, I can reframe my story, at least to myself, right? At least be honest about it to yourself because it does frame who you are. So, and this is where the reframing of the story comes in. These are my flaws. If traditionally, society and community tells me that these are my flaws. These are my character defects, right? That I have depression, I have anxiety, I have PTSD, that I'm an addict. I have crazy obsessive thinking. I obsess about the minutiae of the minutiae, right? But all of these things have upsides in my life. Every one of them. Right? The depression is bloody ordinary, right? But it means I understand people, I understand myself, and I have empathy and compassion, more than most. The anxiety is good because I get shit done, right? I have PTSD, I'm still trying to work out what the upside of that is. The upside of being an addict, though, is that I can get stuff done in any country for any price at any time you want. I have crazy obsessive thinking. The upside of that is if I work with you and you're in a startup, I work a lot with startups, tech startups in particular. And a lot of them will come to me with their website design, which is like the worst job in the world because you can't tell someone their website's ugly. It's like saying your kid's ugly, right? But a lot of times I have to say that website is ugly, dude. And they're like, oh, my 19-year-old nephew made it and he loves it. I'm like, all right, whatever. But the upside of the minutiae thinking, the real grain, narrow and down thinking rather than the big picture thinking is they'll say, this is our logo. And I'll say, if you go with that hue of blue, with that hex code, 5252AB, instead of going 5218CD, which is another blue, because of course I know that, right? But if I say, if you go with that blue, it'll clash against Facebook's blue. So if you advertise on Facebook, it's actually going to turn people away. And the user testing shows that people aren't likely to trust or buy something from you because your blue is too close to the Facebook blue. Like, who the fuck knows these things, right? So this is an upside of that. I'm unreliable, right? And I don't mean, I just won't turn up. I mean, I'll be late, I'm hard to get on the phone and all that. The upside of being unreliable is nobody actually relies on you for anything. It's amazing, right? I fatigue really easily. The upside of that is that I get the help, I get the sleep that I need, I get the rest that I need. And so often in startup or any industry, small businesses, big businesses like yours, we're told this lie from the media that you must do 20 hours a day and you must hustle and grind, two worst words ever. You must hustle and grind and you must put everything else on hold and just ignore your family and your children and your friends and community because you've got to hustle and grind. And if you don't, if you're not doing 20 hours a day, you're failing. You're a failure. You're not trying hard enough. You're not good enough. You're not enough. Right? None of those things are true. But if we don't get the sleep we need, then those things are definitely true. I'm unpredictable. I don't mean I'm going to pick up the chair and throw it across the room and storm all out or whatever, but I just know that when I open my eyes in the morning, my family, my kids, me, I don't know what version of me they're going to get. The upside of that is, when they get the very best version of me, it's really good. And I take risks. I'm not risk averse. So, I deal with funded startups who have maybe $10 million of someone else's money to spend, and they're all like terrified to spend it. I'm like, no, give it to me. I'll spend it. I'll spend it in the next 45 minutes, right? Hopefully not mixed in with this, but but that is a real gift to me. So I've reframed my story from one of defects of character, flaws, to saying these things. I could think of these things as my flaws, and they will be. They will absolutely be if I think they are. But I choose to think of them instead as my superpowers. All these things that could take me down actually lift me up. Right? Because I am superhuman. I am better at dealing with stuff than probably everybody in this room. And that's not saying you don't want to wish for that, by the way. It's not an aspirational thing, but it's just the way that it is. Because I know how deep and dark and horrible that end is, and I know how great and lit and wonderful that end is. And the majority of people don't know that. They know this. They know the median of not so crap, not so great, just all right. And I am super jealous of that. Right? But the fact is I am superhuman because I can deal with that, and sometimes I can deal with that in a sentence or a minute or a day. So they're my superpowers, and the superpowers come out as this. The character flaws get turned around to say, those things are true about me, but it means that I have great empathy. It means that I understand humans, and I understand human connection, and I cherish it. And I cherish human connection because it's literally kept me alive. It's literally saved my life a couple of times, which is why I'm an ambassador for Lifeline. You wouldn't have to work too hard to put those two things together. I know that when my depression is at its worst, my creativity is absolutely at its best. I write beautifully, I create beautiful things, I do great marketing work. I do the very best work I do is on those days when I can't get out of bed. Right? And I'm well aware of my vulnerabilities. You don't have to tell me what my vulnerabilities are. I know I'm well aware, which means I'm well aware of yours. And I'm more likely to accept you for them. That's the reframing of my story. So I want you to think again now, just 20 seconds of mindful thinking on this. What are your superpowers? What are the things that other people who you work with, who might be sitting next to you, bemoan about you? You're too loud, you're too arrogant, you're too opinionated, you're too late, you are too slack, you're too depressed, you're too female, you're too old, you're too young, whatever it might be. Right? Think about that thing for a moment, and everyone knows it. You know it about yourself, right? And think, how can you reframe that story? Because it doesn't matter what they think about you. And I say this to my kids 100 times a day, which is why it rolls off the tongue so easily. What somebody else thinks of you is none of your bloody business. So, let's talk about a little bit about the world that you're moving in. I watched Craig this morning, and I've seen his presentation before, and even working in this tech world, it still makes me feel old and sad and under pressure. But I do want to tell you the story that I live in and the world that you live in. And often when I talk about this tech or future or social stuff or whatever, startup world, this is the face that looks back at me after a while. Because I can get off on very, very nerdy tangents, right? So I'll try and just rein that in as much as I can. Sometimes we think about tech in particular and marketing and small business and startup and innovative industries like yours. And I talk about this tech stuff, and you might sit there and think, well, I'm not very clever, I'm not very smart, I'm not very creative, I'm not very techy, I'm not very whatever, so I'm feeling a bit out of place here, or I'm going to fail or whatever. So if you're sitting there thinking you may not be as creative as you want to be, I want to show you this. This is the Twitter account of the Big Ben clock. And it's operated for 7 years. and it just auto tweets every hour how many bongs appropriately it is for the time of the day. That's all it does, that's all it's ever done, and 500,000 people follow it. So if you're feeling like you're not very clever or creative or whatever, don't sweat it, because the world is getting dumber around us every single day. But there's other things that happen every day that you do have to maybe think about more, and that is just the fact that you are all content creators and you're all trying to tell your story in a mess and mass of noise already out there, right? That hurts my brain that we're creating so much content. Everyone's a photographer, everyone's a journalist, everyone's a food reviewer, for sure, right? Everyone is an expert. Everyone wants their voice heard. Everyone wants to take a photo and put it on Instagram or whatever. And so content is going like this. How are you going to get the story of your small business or your industry or whatever it is you do in amongst all that noise? Right? And the only way to do that is with good storytelling. So every single day we produce more content than 2003 from the beginning of time. But every single day also, 1 in 5 things that will be typed into Google today will have never been typed into Google before. That's every day. So if you're sitting there thinking, I can't keep up, well, the world's biggest curator of stuff that's ever been can't keep up either. So cut yourself a little bit of slack. Data is really, really important and becoming very, very important because it means money. The data that you sit on, the data that you know in your business about your customers, about your industry, about your resellers, about whatever it might be, is actually worth a lot of money to someone else who wants that data but can't get it. Right? And the fact is that 90% of all data has only been, of all data about the human condition has only been collected in the last year. We've only just got onto that. And this brand knows that better than most. Hands up if you never ever sign into Facebook ever in this room. Just put your hands loud and proud. 15 people. Right? 20 people maybe. Out of this many people, that's kind of Australia. And so for the rest of us who do sign into Facebook, Facebook holds 1 million points of data about every single user. Right? They know 1 million things about you and you and you and you. And they don't know anything that you haven't told them. So think about that data exchange, right? And how that shapes your story. Because the value of that is you as businesses and marketers can use all of that data to find the right people at the right time on the right platform and ignore all the others. That's free to you to use, which is incredible to me. Facebook knows about data, so does LinkedIn. LinkedIn signs up 2 new members every second of every day. But that's not the interesting thing about their data. The interesting thing about LinkedIn is that they've just lowered the age, the minimum age to sign up to this entrepreneurial job search business building website to 13 years old. So now there's 13-year-old, just in case you weren't sitting there decaying fast enough, there's 13-year-old entrepreneurs in the seafood industry, no, without a doubt, who are on LinkedIn, looking for investment, looking for product growth, looking for whatever. And I, as someone who invests in an advice startup, I get 2 emails, or 2 Facebook messages mostly, a month, on minimum, from some 13-year-old, 15-year-old kid, usually in regional Australia, or regional somewhere, who has this startup idea. They've written this bit of code, they've built this thing, whatever it might be, and they just need help to launch the product. At least 2 a month. They're coming. Right? And they're your market and your competition. So that's why I think storytelling is the single most important thing you need to know in your business today. The single most. And how does your story then affect how you market your business? Well, you have this great opportunity because you are literally bringing people together, helping them celebrate, helping them commiserate, helping them be proud, helping them be fed, nourished, helping them do all these things. Every time somebody imbibes or uses one of your products, right, they're having an experience. And very few industries can do this, right? the fact is that the majority of the time people are eating seafood or having a seafood meal, there's some happiness attached to that in their life. And, you know, self-managed super and funeral directors don't have that luxury. Right? So think about that experience as being very important for you. And then think about how you sell. Now, I know that in this room there's a lot of different businesses, a lot of different jobs, a lot of different sectors in your industry, right? But the one common thread through it all is you're all trying to sell something to someone. And you're probably, maybe, some of you will be doing it the wrong way. Which is to say that you'll be doing it the way that marketers and salespeople have told you to do it forevermore. And that is this. If I was trying to sell you this little clicker doodaddy thing, right? Which I'm sure has a better name than that. I would tell you, traditional marketing and sales says for me to tell you, look, it has 5 buttons on the front. It's made by Logitech, it's black. It weighs whatever it weighs, has 2 AAA batteries in it. It has the little laser thing that drives cats crazy. I could buy it at JB Hi-Fi, $59.95. This is how much warranty it has, blah, 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 blah. This is where it's made and all those things, right? That's what we do, right? We tell them everything. We tell them every single feature we can think of, right? None of which is important or interesting or going to change the fact that whether I'm going to buy this or not. But you can't see that, and I can't see that when I'm selling stuff either, because I'm so into it. And it's so important in my life, and you must have this if I'm selling this to you, right? It's really important. Instead of thinking, I'm not interested in any of that. I'm interested in how this is going to change my life. That's the difference between selling and storytelling. So if I was going to say, and story selling, if I was going to sell myself this thing, or someone sells this thing to me, they should say, if you buy this clicker, you'll be better at public speaking. If you're better at public speaking, it means you can charge more for it. If you can charge more for it, it means you don't have to do as much. Right? And if you don't have to do it as much, it means you can stay home more. And if I can stay home more, it means I can surf at my own break. I can go to my kids' numbers and reading on Tuesday mornings in first class, which is mind-killing. The problem with that class is like, and those things is my kids are all so brilliant, the other kids are all so dumb. Like, it's just challenging me. But I can do those things, and it means I can cuddle my babies more. Right? If I buy this clicker, I get to cuddle my babies more. That's all the marketing message is required. Right? Tell me how it's going to change my life. How many of us do that? I would venture none. Right? Because you're all telling me where it's made, where it's caught, how it tastes, how much it is, when you have to eat it by, where you can buy it, what you shouldn't buy, what you should have with it, or what you shouldn't have with it, all those things. Instead of saying, this product, fish, whatever it might be, will change your life, and this is how. And to go back to what the panel was saying, what Stan was saying with that country of origin stuff, which is super interesting to me, is if I'm going to eat some barra, tell me not only the country of origin from a modern country of origin sense, but what Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander country is it from? What stories, 60,000-year-old stories, are surrounding this product? Tell me that. Tell me the difference it makes to a family or a community or a person living on Melville or living on the Tiwi Islands, or that community. If I buy and eat that fish, I'm going to fucking eat it, right? Because I'm interested in that. But we don't do that because we tell them what it tastes like and how much it is and how much it weighs and where it's caught and blah, blah, blah. So what's the best vehicle then? You know, coming from Facebook and Twitter, you're probably going to think I'm going to say both those things. I'm not. The best vehicle is your best vehicle, right? And one of the phrases I use all the time, which is now suddenly ironic and really appropriate, is you've got to go fishing where the fish are, which is like my marketing 101. But it's true, right? If the majority of people who are likely to buy your product or be engaged in your business or you are on Twitter, then that's where you should be. If they're on Facebook, that's where you should be, Insta and so on, right? So I'm just going to run real quickly through these. But a lot of people say to me, look, I've only got a limited amount of money, time, resources, effort, whatever it might be. I want to just use one thing. What should that one thing be? And I always say, well, it should be Facebook, in that case, if that's the case, right? Because everyone's there, you saw, in this room. Everyone's there. But this is the one that I think will, in 4 or 5 years, have a bigger user base than Facebook, which would be incredible. But Instagram is a behemoth. And the reason it's grown so fast, and the reason it's so important to us, is that it has one thing that none of the others have. And that is beauty. Lighting, filters, loveliness, creativity, all those things. You can't post a text rant of 4 paragraphs about marriage equality on Instagram, right? But you can upload a photo of your voting ballot. In fact, if you don't, did you even vote? Like, that's the truth of it. But, you know, Instagram is, and in your world, super important because you're selling imagery and story, and there's no better way to sell imagery and story than by providing some imagery and story. Yeah, YouTube, same, right? Moving picture, and YouTube being owned by Google just makes it even more important to you, because Google is always going to skew your search results against video. Twitter is very good for little niche moments, right? Moments in industry. Certainly events like this, or you can see down here on the screen, and if you're following the hashtag, you'll see all those things, right? But the trouble with Twitter is it doesn't know what it is. You know, it's got 3 million people who follow it, who are using it in Australia, but only 1 million of those actually tweet. 2 million of those are voyeurs. They're sitting in this room right now, watching that hashtag, or they'll watch Q&A on Wednesday night and watch it, or they'll watch the grand final and watch it. Facebook Live and Be Live and things like this live streaming, which we're doing here today as well, is a really valuable tool for you as marketers and industry people, because you can't fake it. It's impossible to fake it. There's no re-edits, there's no retakes, there's no do-overs. This is it, right? And that's why it's really important. If you use something like Be Live, and you can see here I'm doing this with Beck Flynn, who's another industry person from me, obviously being hilarious, saying something funny. But we do this every now and again, where we just live stream the two of us talking rubbish about marketing and stuff like that. And it goes live, and people love it. Comment, share. Facebook loves it, because Facebook wants you to use Facebook Live, so it pushes you up in its algorithmic distribution of your content. You could be doing this with suppliers, politicians, mayors, community folk, Indigenous fishers, millions of people who your following would be interested in you speaking to them, asking them questions, giving you some kudos to your own brand. Then Instagram stories and Snapchat, same sort of thing, but very quick and short. And then audio, the use of audio is important as well, through something like SoundCloud. So what's your best vehicle? And when I say that, I don't mean what's the one you like the best, or what's the one you're most familiar with, because that doesn't matter. It's not about you. It's about your fish. Going fishing where the fish are, where are they all? Are you on there? Right? Or is that maybe one of the things you're afraid of that we started with? So I'm going to finish this. I want to tell you the 11 ways that I tell my story better. I don't use shoulds and musts. I don't tell you what you should do or what you must do, because I don't know you and I don't know your business, right? And when you go through rehab and when you go through constant kind of counselling and different things, you get very good at taking responsibility for your own shit and no responsibility for yours. So this is the way that I tell my story better, these 11 things. The first thing is the use of instantaneous messaging. That be instant in nature is something we could never do before, because the newspaper ad had to be in 6 days ago, and it'll be in next Friday's paper 13 days later. Like there's no instantaneous nature of that. That's now. The second thing is then to introduce some conversational nature of this stuff. I'm happy to give this deck to anyone who wants it too, by the way. But being conversational is the opposite to marketing and sales and advertising, kind of from 2005 backwards, forevermore, where billboards scream at you, tell you what you should do, what you must do, or an ad in a newspaper just tells you, doesn't ask you, right? But now we have the opportunity to ask them what they want from us and then give it to them. What a crazy idea. Asking your customers what they want and then give it to them, right? But that's the modern nature of this. Authenticity, as I mentioned at the start, is so important. I want to know I want to know the good stuff about your business. I want to know the good stuff about your products. But I want to know some of the stuff ups too. I want to know why it's hard. I want to know why you do it. Why do you do it? Right? Everybody who is here in business, if you're in a small business especially, why the hell do we do that? Right? When we can go and get a job, probably all of us could go and get a job for probably more money and a whole lot less stress and a whole lot more sleep, but we don't do that because we are in the business doing this, right? Tell us why. That stuff is really important. Be visual in nature. Instagram, end of story, right? Be visual in nature. Show me what it's like. Show, don't tell. Show me what's going on. Be bold, right? I reckon boldness is one of the sexiest human traits you can have. It's really emboldening. It's really engaging, you know, and you get people if you're bold. If you tell them about your bold vision, people come along for the ride. Meekness is crap. Nobody wants anything to do with meekness, right? But boldness is super engaging. The problem with boldness, though, is that there's a line where boldness becomes arrogance. Nobody likes this, everybody likes this. So you have to find out where your line is. Be surprising. In Australian small business, and I bet in the Australian seafood industry, we don't want to surprise anyone. We just want to do what we've always done. And we want to do that more. And we want more people to like what we've always done, right? We don't ever change the process. We don't introduce any wacky, not wacky, but any kind of new, innovative stuff. But the surprising thing can be a handwritten note, right? A present you didn't think you were going to get, a sharing of someone else's Facebook post in your industry that they never assumed they'd get or thought they'd get from you. That stuff is really powerful, and it costs nothing. Be surprising. You'd be amazed. You'd be surprised when you get out of it. This is a big one for me, and if people who follow me know this is fairly true with me. I think nobody wants you to pick a fight, but everyone wants you to pick a side. I want to know what you think. I want to know what your business thinks, what your industry thinks about climate change, about marriage equality, about refugees, about anything you like, which people go, oh shit, I would never say that. Say it, right? Because otherwise you're just in that grey mess of nothing, which neither stands out nor isn't seen. Now, I don't want anyone in this room to be in that business. All right? Tell me where your line in the sand is. What have you got to lose? It is actually what you think, right? It's what you think. So own it. Be open. When I worked at Facebook, the CEO of Facebook was a young bloke called Mark Zuckerberg. And when I worked for just over 3 years. And every Friday, the CEO of this billion-dollar company stands up in front of his entire workforce between 4 and 5 p.m. local time. You could dial in from any of the satellite offices. And he stands up in front of his entire workforce and says, you can ask me anything you like. And people ask anything. There's no rules. There's no, there's civility rules, but apart from that, there's no rules. And I don't know too many businesses where the billion-dollar CEO of the billion-dollar company stands up and goes, tell me how you think I'm going. But when he does that, if you haven't already drunk the Kool-Aid, which I did in about the third day, but if you haven't already drunk the Kool-Aid, you will then. You'll feel amazingly empowered and part of that business. And I wonder if that's the business you're in, whether it's the business you run, or whether it's the business you work for somebody else in, or whether that's what the industry is like. Is the seafood industry of Australia open and transparent? Or is there some parts you can't go in? The opposite to Facebook is Apple, where a geographic third of the campus of the Apple building at Cupertino, the majority, 90% of the workforce, aren't allowed in. All right, because it's where innovative product design is happening or whatever. And they're so terrified of a leak. Imagine working there. Imagine working in a building where you can't walk through that door because you're not enough. All right, so think about that in your own business. Be structured in your storytelling. I'm going to race through this bit because I don't want to go over time, but structure is super important. Every story has the same structure. The way it was, the way we changed it, the way it will be. or the way it is, the way we will change it, the way it will be. If you extrapolate that out a little bit further, this is the formula that I use to design every single tweet, every single video that I make, every single website for any businesses that I'm connected with or own. I go through this every single time. Once upon a time, this is the status quo. And every day, this is what happens. But then one day, we changed it. We decided to do this, this, and this. And because of that, we achieved this. And because of that, we now achieve this, this, and this. Until finally, everyone lives happily ever after. That is an absolutely foolproof pro forma way of telling a story, any story on any platform, at any time, for any duration. Absolutely foolproof. Right? You can use that if you like. So, which brings me finally to this. Does anyone in the room not know what this is? Put your hands up if you don't. There are, oh my God, there are actually some people. Right, so these three, I'm so jealous of you right now, you three. This is Frozen, which everyone else is like, oh, it sure is. And Frozen is an interesting storytelling case study because it broke the mould, the Disney mould, in a lot of ways, right? And Brave before it did a little bit, but this one really took hold of it because the two main characters, the characters with all the power in the movie are female. That never happens in Disney. Right? This dude who would be the hero, the prince, if you like, in every other single Disney film, he's not required at the happy ending. He's not part of it. Right? Never happens in Disney. This douchebag, now for you three, little spoiler alert, but he turns out to be the baddie, right? So, and in Disney films, the baddie is never a dude. It's always the wicked witch or the evil stepmother or whatever, right? Disney hates women, man. Like, it's... And then this little weird, disturbing little character is, you kind of wonder why he's in there. He's kind of the Jar Jar Binks of Frozen, really, but from a storytelling angle, he's important, and this is why. If I get the timeline of Frozen and split it into important incidents throughout the film, part of storytelling structure is the use of story arcs. So different characters, different voices, mixing together with other characters and so on. And if I overlay the story arcs of Frozen here, you'll see just how much I look at Frozen and Pixar movies, but also you can tell by looking at that visually, even for the three people who've never seen the film before, these are the two sisters. You can see that the two pink sisters are kind of together the whole movie, right? But then halfway through, one of them goes mental and starts shooting ice all over the joint, and they split up, and then they're back together at the end for the happy ending. Likewise, you can see that the would-be prince, the would-be hero, is kind of just in a little bit. He's in the ending, but he's not required for it. And Hans, being the baddie, comes in halfway through and he's eliminated from the film to allow the happy ending. Now, why am I showing you this, apart from to show off how much I know about Pixar movies, is because so much of our storytelling structure we don't do enough of prior, right? So I want you to think about structuring and your storytelling and your marketing in a way that you can follow through over a period of time. For instance, I'll give you a 6-week thing, and I'll finish with this. I'll give you a 6-week lead into opening a second store of ABC Seafood, right? Let's just suspend reality for a moment, right? So you've got one shop and you're opening a new shop. Now, you don't do all the marketing and all the storytelling from the new shop the day before, right? You start doing it 6 weeks before. And you start doing it with, and let's just say this is the Twitter account of, sorry, it's not ABC Seafood, it's Mary Seafood. I just did it out the back. Let's say the CEO of Mary Seafood is Mary, and this is her Twitter account. And she tweets, you know, a couple of days apart, a week apart. You can see in the 28 days out, she says something, 16 days out again, and so on until she's starting to get pretty excited about the new store being open in a few days. Her tweets become more prolific at the end, and she's talking about, she's very excited, blah, 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 and we're opening tomorrow, and we're open, right? The next one then is, if I overlay the next story arc, the next voice is Mary Jones, who's the actual owner. This is her personal Twitter account, so you can see it's spaced out over a week or so, and leading up to the store opening, she's a bit more prolific as well. And then the next one then is, catching up, is Jenny Smith, who works there. So she's not going to tweet about how great the place is every day. She works there, right? So she's like, oh yeah, I've got to open the new store. We're It's great, and it's down the street, it's in the high street, it's bigger than the old shop. I'm stoked about it, and we're opening it tomorrow. Add in, so it's three different voices telling the same story, right? Add in then all the retweets, ad hoc engagement, newspaper articles, whatever else, and that all binds it together. It's kind of the Olaf or the Jar Jar Binks of the whole thing, ties it all together. And then you might have a different platform completely, like blog posts, whether you just drop those in, towards the end, and it just makes a complete sort of storytelling, visual structure of the 6 weeks before you open that store. All of those voices are telling the same story, but in different voices, in different ways, about different things. And they could be people in your business, they could be industry professionals, they could be politicians, they could be whatever. But if you own that story and the way it's structured and told, then it just gives you some purpose moving forward and allows you to tell your story better. So, does everyone get that? Sweet. Okay, so the last two then, number 10, super important to me, is just to be you. I said all those other things, be instant, be visual and whatever. Being you is probably the most important one. That's plenty. That will always be plenty. And then the last one, the most important one, is if you are in a small business especially, that's the majority of the audiences I speak to are small businesses, right? If you're in a small business of your own doing, right, for your own sins, you've started this small business, and for 3 weeks, you wake up and you go, oh, Jesus, I've got to go in that place again. Then you should shut the doors and get a job. Because it's too bloody hard to do all of that stuff and deal with all that stuff and deal with how hard the government makes it to run a small business in Australia if it's not fun as well. And if you're running a business that isn't fun, you are never going to employ anybody for any length of time. So, my very last thing is this. The secret weapon to winning business, to owning business, to building business from 2017 on, from my point of view, isn't some tech widget, isn't some fancy thing, a techie thing that you don't know about. It's something we all had for a long, long time and we've forgotten it, particularly in business. And the secret weapon, I think, is kindness. I don't make a single business decision in any of my businesses or anyone I work with if it doesn't first meet the metric of, is this kind to me? Is this kind to my family? Is this kind to my community industry? Is it kind to my country, to my planet? And if it's not, I'm not doing it. And if you operate a business that doesn't have kindness as one of its pillars, you're in the wrong business. Because kindness is never going to cost you business. You're never going to lose business because you're being too kind. You're only going to ever gain it. And we've forgotten that. Of all the tech and all the future and all the startup and all the robots, we've forgotten it. All we have to do is be kind. So this is my book, which you can look at my website, which goes over a lot of that sort of stuff. My challenge to you is this. We started the Prezzo with me asking you what you're afraid of. And I want to finish it with this. My challenge to you is every day when I wake up, I say two things. I know two things. I say two things to myself. The first thing is, today, my addiction will try and kill me. I know that. But if I stay focused, if I stay connected to people, if I'm mindful of that and all those things, it won't. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the second challenge I ask myself every day, and I fail most days, is this. What would I do today if I wasn't afraid? What would you do in your business, in your job, in your industry today if you weren't afraid? I asked you what you're afraid of at the start. Maybe you refer to that. Maybe you're thinking of something else now. But as an industry, what could you do if you weren't afraid? This is me. I'm at Nick Bowdish across everything, as I said, on nickbowdish.com. I really want to thank you for your attention today. I'm sorry I've gone a bit over time, Jane. But I really appreciate your attention. Thanks very much.